Wellness Club. We have an exciting call and guest with us here today, biochemist Dr. Peter Josling. He's a garlic expert and a founder of the Garlic Center, and he's provided our Camucin product, a very impactful and effective product for many of our customers. Peter, great to be with you again. Wonderful to have you on this call.
Hi, Chuck. Nice to talk to you again, all the way from the United Kingdom, especially at this troubled time. So hopefully we can help a few people tonight.
Well, let's get started. Can you give us kind of an historical perspective on the use of garlic throughout the millennia?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's one of those compounds with such a rich history that goes back literally 5,000 to 6,000 years. I mean, the most interesting reports of garlic being used for human health actually goes back to a very famous papyrus in Egypt called the Codex Ebers. And there it's recorded that garlic was used in many of the remedies for things like coughs and colds, for stomach problems, for skin problems. And we know that there was quite a lot of evidence, even in those days, to suggest that having a daily ration of garlic in your diet was actually very beneficial. So it kept you fit and healthy. And we know over much more recent history that it's the allicin that's released when you cut or crush or chop or cook your fresh garlic. You release a compound called allicin, and we know that that is basically the most active agent from fresh garlic. If you like, it's what we would call the mother substance. So we say that over the course of history, many different populations have used garlic as both a food and a medicine. And we know the basic chemistry now that you can see on this slide, where in the central core of a garlic clove, you can see it there, we have an enzyme called allanase, and that's packed into that central core of a garlic clove. And then around every single cell surrounding that central core, there is another compound called alliine, and that is a sulfur compound. And as soon as the garlic gets attacked, let's say in the ground as it's growing, by perhaps a virus or a bacteria or a fungus or even a parasite, then what happens is these two compounds break out of their cells, the allanase and the alliine come together, and the first thing they produce is allicin. Everybody knows that. The basic chemistry of garlic is very well known. The allicin is such a potent antimicrobial, and here you can see the chemical structure. The important thing to look at there is the sulfur-oxygen double bond. If you look at that, that is incredibly similar to the first antibiotic that was produced back in the early part of the 20th century, i.e. penicillin. So allicin, which has been around for literally thousands of years, is actually very similar in structure and nature to penicillin, which was one of the first antibiotics ever invented. Now, unfortunately, most of the antibiotics that have been released over the coming 100 years or so, or 70, 80 years at least, they develop resistance to killing bacteria. Whereas over that period of time, there's been absolutely no data to suggest that there is any resistance that builds up to using allicin as a natural antiviral, antibacterial, or antifungal agent. And that's because we've learned a lot more now as to how the allicin actually works. We've actually used some very sophisticated production techniques to stabilize the allicin. Basically what we do is we trick the alliine and the allanase into reacting with each other for a considerable amount of time under controlled temperature and pressure conditions. And that means that we then dilute this allicin that's released using water, just water. And that basically pushes out enormous amounts of allicin and allows the enzyme to keep reacting with the alliine, that sulfur compound. So believe it or not, from literally one head or bulb of garlic, we can make probably close to 3 million capsules of Camucin. Obviously, we have to add in the organic camu, but the allicin itself we can produce in very large volumes from very small amounts of fresh garlic. It is quite a complicated procedure. It is patented, and it means that we have to control the temperature and pressure to make the reaction continue. So it's not as easy as it might sound, but at the end of the day, our production can probably convert about 97% of the alliin in a garlic bulb, whereas most other garlic supplements around the world would be able to convert no less than about 4%. They wouldn't be able to convert any more than that, in fact.
Well, it's an amazing process and quite useful because, as I understand it, allicin once formed is not stable. And it's very significant that you found a way to stabilize it and produce a large amount of it.
Well, that's right. I mean, if you took your bulb or your cloves and you cut or crushed or cooked or chopped them, the Spanish believe if you smash it with a knife, you get a different flavor, etc., etc. But that physical process brings together those two compounds and the allicin is released. Now, allicin in that state is incredibly unstable. And within literally microseconds, it's degrading and forming lots of other sulfur compounds, some of which are very unstable and have not even been captured in a laboratory, and some of which are reasonably stable, some of which smell, some of which don't. But basically what we do with the Camucin product is the stabilized allicin is basically allicin. So once it gets into the bloodstream, it then breaks down into all those other sulfur compounds. So you get the benefit pretty much of real garlic without the side effects and without losing this unstable allicin, because we've managed to concentrate it down and stabilize it so that we can put it into a powder and then put that into a capsule and do clinical research to prove that it actually does something.
How many cloves of garlic would it take to have the same allicin content as one capsule of Camucin?
Oh, it'd be at least 35 cloves, Chuck, at least.
Yep.
So for every capsule you take, you're really basically getting about 35 cloves worth of garlic. And you wouldn't have any friends in the whole of America if you were to try and eat that much garlic. And it would also, of course, upset your stomach quite quickly.
Absolutely, yes.
Camucin would never do that.
Now, Peter, back when we met in 2003, I recall you were doing a little research and found that there was a synergy between the stabilized allicin powder and a buffered ester C. That's why we chose Camu to combine with it, its vitamin C content. Can you comment on that as a tactic?
Well, you probably remember that my background really has been in clinical research in the health food industry. I've done clinical trials over the past 25, 30 years on various extracts, and obviously allicin is one of them. And I also looked at vitamin C in quite detail. We did a double-blind placebo-controlled study to try and show that that a buffered vitamin C was better than other forms. And it turned out to be moderately better. But at the end of the day, we know that Camu, as you've suggested, it's one of the most rich sources of vitamin C in the world. So it made very good sense to put those two together. And when you put them together, you get what's known as synergy between the two ingredients. In other words, it's much better to have them in one capsule rather than taking the allicin separately and then the Camu afterwards or before. So you get synergy between the ingredients. And in this case, the synergy is in its biological activity. So we know full well that the Camucin product, for example, is incredibly antimicrobial. It kills viruses, it kills fungus, it kills spores, it kills bacteria, it kills intestinal parasites. And of course, it has other benefits, such as controlling blood pressure and cholesterol, which we hardly ever talk about, but they are significant benefits to certain groups of individuals around the world.
I recall that you had done a double-blind placebo study relating to the stabilized allicin powder and the common cold. Can you tell us a little bit about the results you found?
Sure, yeah. I mean, we were the first group to do a double-blind placebo-controlled study on a garlic extract, and they took just one capsule a day or a matched placebo, and the net result was that the patients in the placebo group had more than 2.5 times as many infections as there were in the active group. So immediately, if you take one capsule a day of, let's say, Camucin, you're 60% less likely to catch a cold in the first place. The study also showed that you had far fewer days of infection if you were unlucky enough to catch a cold in the active group. And also, more importantly, the number of repeat infections was much, much, much lower in the active group than it was in the placebo group. So what that's telling you is that not only does the stabilized allicin kill the cold and flu virus, but it also prevents a secondary infection. And that secondary infection could be another virus, or as in today's modern pandemic, we're already understanding that secondary infections tend to be quite often bacterial infection. And obviously we know that the allicin together with the camu will kill out bacterial infection as well. And I just want to remind people that the last global flu pandemic in 1912, I think it was, the Spanish flu outbreak, there were 58 million deaths. And looking at the data that was collected at the time, we can now prove that the vast majority of those deaths were through secondary infection. And the secondary infection was Streptococcus pneumoniae, i.e. they got pneumonia and died. And that's exactly what's happening in today's current world. So we need to be very aware about secondary infections and how to prevent them. And that's certainly what allicin and camu will do for people.
I know that just infectious disease is a serious problem today. Do you have any knowledge of the scope of that, the things that are going on, or how it relates to almost all disease?
Sure. I mean, the Center for Disease Control in your country, in the States, they have a number of pathogens that they call escape pathogens. And that's seven bacterial species that are multi-drug resistant. In other words, there are very, very few, if any, pharmaceutical antibiotics that can actually kill these pathogens. So if you're unlucky enough to catch one and your own immune system cannot deal with it, then there's a very, very good chance, I'm afraid, that it will take your life. These pathogens vary from Streptococcus pneumoniae, as I mentioned earlier, to Acinetobacter baumannii, which our troops, Canadians, Americans, and British troops caught during the Iraq wars and also in Afghanistan. It causes a major chest infection. And we've proven, and it's been presented at various microbiological meetings, that the allicin can kill out Acinetobacter baumannii, whereas it's multi-drug resistant. In other words, there are very few antibiotics that can touch it. And then the other bacteria that I will just mention, which is such an obvious one, is methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, or MRSA, or MRSA, I think you call it in the States. That is a bacteria where 1 in 3 people on the planet will carry Staph aureus up here in their nasal passages. And Staph aureus, unfortunately, is one of these bacteria that can migrate and change its shape and structure and become multi-drug resistant. Now, we know, and we guarantee to all researchers, all distributors, that the allicin is tested before it's released from any factory to show that it will kill this kind of bacterial infection. So it's a guarantee to anybody that buys in that they are buying a very, very good antibacterial agent. And I see its growth and popularity growing over the coming 5 to 10 years as more and more antibiotics become resistant. And the really cool thing is we know how it works. We know that it's unlikely to develop resistance. And we know that it's very, very well tolerated by people because it comes from garlic. Now, okay, there are some people that I've met who are sensitive to garlic, but very, very few. And the really cool thing about the allicin is that it has lots of other benefits that all patients, or customers if you prefer, can get benefit from. And that includes things like diabetes, heart disease, obviously. Psoriasis is where the cell turnover is so enhanced that your skin degrades so regularly. If you take a product like the Camucin regularly, you should help psoriasis sufferers. And then obviously, when you look at cancer, we know a lot more about cancer than we did maybe 20 years ago when I started researching into allicin in particular. And it's now, garlic is now recognized as an anti-cancer food by the American Cancer Association. So it's very good sense to eat more garlic in your diet, but obviously you don't want to lose all your friends. So you can eat a bit more garlic and also take a daily capsule of the Camucin, because that will help to keep you fit and healthy, boost your immune system, and basically keep you free from recurrent infections and free, hopefully, from new infections as they come flying in to the immune system, which, remember, begins up here in the nose, the ears, the eyes, and the mouth.
Well, is it possible that allicin um, can modulate the immune system, boost the immune system? I think you alluded to.
Yeah,
And
definitely. We know, Chuck, we've looked at it in detail now. We know that when you take allicin on a regular basis, you increase the number of CD4 T cells in the immune system. Those are the killer cells that your immune system has to produce to be able to kill out infections. So we've shown with various other formulations of allicin that if you look at live blood, you can see the blood plasma cleaning up very, very quickly, getting rid of things like funguses and viruses and bacteria, and also cholesterol crystals. We've seen that you can improve the quality of red blood cells significantly by using allicin, particularly with vitamin C. You can show that your red cells become less clumped, they become cleaner, rounder, more normal, basically. So we know that it works on the immune system very quickly and very substantively.
and you know, it's a food supplement. Garlic, I understand, will attract certain minerals. It's a root basically, and uh, some of those minerals are beneficial to the immune system as well. And since it's food, it's very bioavailable. Can you tell us about some of those minerals?
Well, there'll be things like selenium, which is vital, and zinc and magnesium. Quite a lot of important minerals you would be able to get from garlic very easily. Now, they don't have huge amounts, but at
Right.
the end of the day, if you can just improve the human being's overall population of these minerals, then you will have a dramatic effect on their health and well-being. Again, I've done some clinical work on hair samples that show if you lack certain minerals, then you will be open to all sorts of diseases. And obviously, that's another reason why we put together the Camu with allicin. For those of your listeners who are not quite sure yet, we know that Camu is a very powerful superfruit. Really, it's got a very powerful source of these nutrients and minerals and vitamins. I understand from yourself that it can produce something like 60 times more vitamin C than you can get from an orange. And that's the berries of the Camu. It's incredible, really. So we also know that it's a great source of antioxidant. It's actually an anti-inflammatory as well. It produces what's known as ellagic acid, which has a great place to play in the inflammatory reaction that many people suffer from, whether they're being attacked by a cytokine storm through a virus, for example, then this would help to release that, to remove that cytokine storm by reducing the inflammation pathway. It also guards against liver health. It's very good for diabetes, as we mentioned earlier. And of course, it does support a healthy blood pressure. And there is some evidence to suggest that it may even help to regulate weight loss, and that sort of thing. So Camucin, to my way of thinking, is a really interesting product because, as I said to you, the two agents together act synergistically, and we agree that each capsule will yield around about 37 cloves of raw garlic, which I'm sure you would much rather take one capsule of Camucin. It's much easier. It contains around about 300 milligrams of stabilized allicin powder. Now that allicin will be delivering around 250 to 300 parts per million allicin from every capsule, and that's more than enough to kill out an enormously wide range of gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria, plus viruses ranging from parainfluenza to rhinovirus, and all sorts of other quite nasty viral infections. But what we've added to that is the 150 milligrams of organic camu powder, and we know that we get fantastic results with this naturally potentiated vitamin C and garlic combination.
This product is so exciting, Peter, and I'm so glad we met so many years ago to be able to provide for the consumer that kind of impact. And there is definitely a therapeutic amount of stabilized allicin powder in our product. I want to encourage the listener today to take some action. I want you to get back to the person who referred you to this video or this recording and find out how you can make a purchase and try the product. You won't be sorry. You'll be excited to be able to share this with others as well. And I am excited, Peter, to be able to bring this to the market. And I also want to, we sell a food supplement. Camucin is classified as a dietary supplement. So the statements that Peter and I have made haven't been evaluated by the FDA. And Camucin is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Having said that, thank you so much for listening.